Good evening, Fremont Unified School District community and staff and any other members of our larger Fremont community that may be watching. We want to thank you very much for joining in to our community town hall. Tonight is December 13th, 2021, and we're excited to share some information with you about Fremont Unified School District, the things that we've been up to in the recent months, and the things that are coming in front of us in the months to come. Introductions. And then we'll be going some support for our students, our facilities work, and our financial overview. Starting with our Board of Education, we have Trustee Diane Jones, who is our new board president. Those elections happen each year in December where the board reorganizes itself. Our new vice president on the board is Trustee Vivek Prasad. Our new clerk of the board is Trustee Yajing Zhang. And Trustee Campbell and Trustee Sweeney remain members of our board. We're also very pleased to have an excellent student board member, Tushar Dalmia. And student board member Dalmia just recently participated in a professional development activity with the board and myself as superintendent at the California School Boards Association. Next, of our executive cabinet, myself, CJ Kamek, is superintendent for the district. We are also joined this evening by our Associate Superintendent, Ms. Nancy Torres Pfeiffer. We're also joined by our Assistant Superintendent of Instructional Services, Ms. Leticia Salinas. And our newly appointed Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources, Mr. Zach Larson, was unable to be with us for tonight's town hall, but will be with us for Wednesday evening's town hall. And for familiar with Fremont Unified, you'll likely know that Mr. Larson has been a part of Fremont Unified for over 20 years, and we are thrilled to have him promoting from his position as Director of Secondary Education to Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources. Looking at Fremont Unified School District on a large scale, we have nearly 34,000 students, nearly 3,300 employees, and as is written on the screen in front of you, very clearly, our mission is to provide equitable opportunities, challenge, and inspire. And I will leave the rest of the reading to you. You will note throughout our presentation this evening, there will be many pictures. If they look familiar to you, that might mean that you're following us on one of our social media channels. And we are updating those pretty regularly when we're out at school sites, visiting campuses, and sharing the great things that are happening throughout our schools. As we all know, we were in distance learning all year last year, and we know that included many difficulties for many reasons, despite the great efforts of our staff and our community to build the most robust distance learning program possible. As we return to school this year, we owe gratitude to many people, from our teachers and administrators to our support staff, especially those individuals working in our facilities, our custodians. And as we returned to school this year, we had two options for students. One was to return to full in-person instruction, which nearly all of our students elected to do, a virtual instructional program. At the elementary level, that was our Elementary Virtual Academy, excuse me. At the secondary level, that was our VISTA program. In total, about 5% of our students in Fremont Unified School District elected for a virtual option. The remainder of our students were in person. And I think a large part of that is due to the health and safety protocols that we put in place. As everybody knows, at this point in the year, we have masking both indoors and outdoors. Physical distancing when it's practicable. Again, we know that in prior years we were thinking about 6 feet, even sometimes 3 feet. And we know that the public health guidance has said that physical distancing is appropriate, but there are circumstances during the operation of a school day where it's less practicable than others. Also very pleased that through our risk managers department, we were able to earn an $800,000 grant for COVID-19 testing. And as you know, we now have COVID testing once per week at every school site or work site. And that, I believe, has been a very successful program for us. standpoint and in response to when we have positive cases. Positive cases, we have been reporting them on our website. We've updated our website to keep a rolling average so we know what's really kind of current trends within the last 14 days, but we also keep track of the cumulative cases that we've had as well. We want to make sure that we're reporting that data in a transparent way to our entire community. We also provide notices to our school staffs and the close contacts of individuals who may have been exposed to a positive case. As we kind of turn the page on this discussion, I do want to just go back and share that we've gotten a lot of feedback this year about when and how and who we're notifying of positive cases. And I recognize as a parent myself who has kids in school, both at a high school and a middle school level, both who have had positive COVID cases around them and near them in schools. I think about what that means for our parents. And we are doing our best to make sure that our notifications are out timely and that they're to the appropriate people. The timeliness of the notifications can be impacted by when we are notified of the case, and that varies greatly from one case to the other, but we are working very hard to make sure those notifications are timely and to the right audience. One of the questions that we received in response to our community forum regarding our facilities and safety was if there are regular custodial routines, and there are, if those custodial routines include cleaning the restrooms, and they do. And we will call out that our custodial routines have changed a little bit from pre-pandemic times, and we've put more of a focus on the cleaning of high-touch surfaces and sanitization. And so that might mean that other aspects of our campus are not as clean as they used to be. What does that mean, for example? It might mean that an area of carpet might get vacuumed a little bit less each week, more attention being focused on the disinfecting and the cleanliness of surfaces. So we're very grateful for all the work that our custodial staff is doing on a regular basis, but that was one of the questions that came through prior to the town hall, so I wanted to make sure that was addressed. All of those safety measures in place, it has been absolutely fascinating to welcome our students and our staff back to campus. I've conducted, looking at my board, about 36 site visits this year so far, and that includes from our secondary to our elementary to our preschool programs. I've been really pleased with how well our students, even our youngest students, have been doing with masking on campus and their flexibility in adjusting to this new learning environment. And of course, you can see there's many extracurricular activities that are also happening now as well. Recognizing that there was a very intensive need for support as we return this year, I wanted to call out a few of the things that are happening in Fremont Unified School District in response to supporting our students. So at the elementary level, we're working very hard on our MTSS, which is our multi-tiered systems of support. And as a brief recap for you, if you're not familiar with multi-tiered systems of support, those are systems both academically and behaviorally, where we provide intervention for students. And a level 1 intervention is something that is generally happening during their regular instructional period or their regular school day. And MTSS provides a structure for more intensive interventions based on the needs of students. At the secondary level, we've implemented more restorative practices and professional development focused on those ideals. Additionally, we've implemented more social emotional learning curriculum at our elementary level, as well as some of our secondary programs. We've also increased counseling services, which we felt was very important, both at the elementary and in some cases at the secondary level. We also continue to use our cost referral process. And one of the other questions that came to us from the community prior to the town hall was, how are we spending a lot of our one-time dollars? And so the state gave us and the federal government gave us some significant funding in response to COVID-19. And in that funding, we've had to complete plans that require approval by the Board of Education, and then they are submitted to the California Department of Education. In many cases, these one-time dollars are being funneled towards these improved services for students. And we were grateful to know that they could be spent over a longer period of time than we thought when we originally received the money. They had a 1-year window, and we have a little bit longer to spend them than that. We have to be cognizant about managing the services with the limited term funding. We want to make sure that we're being cognizant of our fiscal picture as well. And as students returned, we've talked about the new safety protocols that they returned to, but many students returned to new buildings. We know that students weren't in school for an entire year and the last third of the prior school year. For example, we might have a 5th grader who now moves to a middle school, and we might have a middle school student moving to a high school setting. So a lot of our students moved into new buildings. Some of them moved into new construction. And in this case, this year, we had some move to a temporary location, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we move into the discussion of facilities. So we are grateful for our community support in Measure E. As is noted on the slide in front of you, Measure E, which passed in 2014, is designed to build and improve facilities, and that work is ongoing through 2025. On the screen, you can see some renderings for Horner and for Centerville. And in the coming slides, you'll see some updates on some of those projects. As you may know, our facility priorities are guided by principles and vision, and these are things that are happening continuously. We'll talk a little bit later in the presentation about our demographics. And as we look at facilities priorities, we look at what are our demographics and enrollment trends showing us? What do our facility needs and assessments show us? How will we fund the work that needs to happen? And obviously continuing to look at what are the educational standards we want to build into our learning spaces for our students and our staff. And those, as you see on the slide, are tied to our long-range facilities master plan and recommendations. So in 2015 and 2017, well before my arrival in Fremont Unified, there was a lot of work that went into planning for the conversion of our middle schools. We've already completed some of that, with much of it in the near future arriving at completion. So we did talk just a moment ago about the long-range facilities plan. We began working on updating that last spring, and because of circumstances related to COVID, focusing on trying to reopen schools, we did pause some of that important work. And we are reigniting that work as we move into this year, because we need to make sure that those long-range facility plans stay current. As we look at the conversion timeline here, you'll see in 2019, Walters welcomes 6th grade students, and Horner this year, back to in-person instruction, was able to open for 6th graders as well. And the Hopkins Junior High campus is the one that was temporarily relocated. You'll recall I mentioned that a while back, a few slides ago. And we relocated the Hopkins campus because the construction was delayed due to a number of issues, and the site just wasn't where we felt that it should be in terms of being safe and ready for staff and for students and for the community. The school continues to be under construction, and as the community may already know and understand, we moved the Hopkins students and staff to the Lila Bringhurst campus for a temporary period of time. The Lila Bringhurst campus was not set to open this year, but it was, from a facility standpoint, ready to open. We were grateful to utilize that opportunity to house our Hopkins students and families, and our transportation team for putting together the busing from the Hopkins location to Lila Bringhurst. And we look forward to that work being completed so that the 7th and 8th grade students can go back to Hopkins in the fall. And then at some point after that, reopening for our 6th, 7th, and 8th graders at Hopkins. We've had a lot of exciting work for Centerville and our Thornton conversions, and those are slated to fully convert at the start of the 2023 school year. So to take a little finer look at each of those projects, You can see here some renderings of Walters if you're looking at the top left of your screen. And on the far right of your screen, you can see some of the actual pictures of the finished construction. I had a great visit at Walters this year. It looks like the staff and the students are really enjoying that campus and the layout. And this was one of our first conversions to happen. We've been very pleased with it. Also this year, I've had multiple visits to Horner, and it was great to see the staff come back into that building, to see the students bring life and energy back to that facility. And that construction project has been a success as well. Like many construction projects, once we opened, there were things that needed to be ironed out. And I thank our facilities managers, VAC staff, our internal staff, and our external consultation groups for addressing those needs at Horner. And it's really been a great start to the year there as well. School conversion, we just briefly talked about. And you can see here on the top right a rendering of the two-story classroom for and then we also have the MPR and the multi-use room. That will also include IT upgrades, HVAC upgrades, plumbing and restroom enhancements, and flooring and ceiling repair and replacements. And you can see on the bottom right of the screen some of the actual construction taking place. Also on this slide, you can see some of the renderings of the two-story building, a layout of the elevation of the south elevation of the building. That's the single-story building. And lastly, on this slide, you can see some of the additional construction that's taking place. For Centerville, I want to thank the students and the staff and the administration there. They've been working through construction on that site since the end of last year. And cohabitating with that much construction can be challenging, but the staff there has done a great job. And I appreciate the work of our contractors and construction managers to keep the school site safe. You can see in the bottom right a rendering. This modernization to existing buildings, in addition to the new two-story building, includes IT upgrades, HVAC and lighting upgrades, plumbing and restroom enhancements, as well as flooring and ceiling repairs and enhancements as well. You can also see the new lunch structure is provided here, a reconfiguration of the drop-off and the pickup, and we've been very excited to see some of these renderings continue to come forward, and we look forward to seeing the project through to completion. It's making good progress. You can see by some of these pictures how far they're coming in the new two-story building. And you can see a layout of the new facility. If it's difficult for you to see all of those pictures on the screen, please know that the presentation will be posted online at the completion, and you'll be able to view the slides, perhaps to zoom in, see a little bit closer if that's something that you're interested in. For our Thornton Middle School conversion project, you can see some renderings of the new front of the school. And as noted here as well, parking and drop-off improvements, IT infrastructure, play fields, and modernization. I recently visited Centerville and saw their construction. Earlier in the year, I was at Thornton and saw how well the buildings towards the back of the camp are progressing, and back of the campus, sorry, not the camp. And you can see a little bit of where those would be designed here, the two-story buildings in the back. And these are some up-to-date pictures of what that construction work is looking like now. Since these have been taken, it's probably even a little bit further along, but you can see there's a lot of exciting work happening there, including the field that's already being almost complete. So we've been very pleased with this progress and very exciting to see the construction going up at Thornton as well. Future considerations for our facilities, as I mentioned, we have our long-range facilities plan. We also will continue to focus on high-need facility areas. So we know we have some localized needs and based on the moment needs. So one of those questions that came from our community was about roofs. That's especially timely given the atmospheric river or rainstorm that we're experiencing in the moment. And we have consultants working with us to identify the roofs in the most need of repair and or replacement. We're looking at how do we strategize that work, need to analyze how we will fund that work, and then when is the right time to complete that work. In the meantime, where we have some roofing needs, our staff is working very hard to make sure that they get addressed. Our staff at the school sites is putting in work orders, and our staff at the district level is responding as quickly as possible. I did receive some communication from staff in the district regarding the status of their roof repairs about prior to the town hall. And I hope that the staff that's watching, the students that are watching, or the community watching knows that we're working very hard to make sure that those issues are addressed as quickly as possible. In addition, we have a need for more outdoor covering for lunch. That's a need that we've heard from our community. It's a need that we're exploring on how we may continue to create that additional covering, because we recognize that eating outside is the ideal circumstance given the fact that we're in a pandemic. Not all schools have the same outdoor covering. Also, we recognize that the California Department of Public Health and Alameda County Public Health do share in their recommendations that, in their guidelines, that it is permissible to eat indoors without your mask. And so we've been as flexible and creative as we can. I appreciate the work of our classified support staff, child nutrition staff, our teachers and administrators on trying to design ways for our students to eat. I was at Niles earlier this year on a rainy day, and the students were doing a great job from lining up to eating and unmasking just to eat and masking back up right away and being responsible about those decisions. So I appreciate everybody's flexibility on that. In terms of continued improvement to practices, what we're talking about in relation to Measure E is how do we continue to be the best stewards of those public dollars as we can be, to create the biggest return on investment for our community for their support of Measure E. And we're also looking at expansions of our transitional kindergarten program. The reason that is included here in this facility section is because when we expand our TK programs, there's oftentimes a facility need that's associated with that. Also, the state is requiring, for those of you that may already know this, a expansion of the grades that are, not the grades, excuse me, the ages that are eligible. So for example, the month eligible for transitional kindergarten will expand beginning next year and go back consecutively each of the next 3 years after that. We're also in very preliminary discussions. No final decisions have been made, but we are exploring what full-day kindergarten could look like for Fremont Unified School District. There are logistical things that need to be ironed out, decided, discussed, and ultimately also negotiated with our labor partners. But full-day kindergarten is something that we are exploring. That again carries with it a facilities implication. Also, obviously, it carries with it some instructional implications and program implications, but that is an area of interest for Fremont Unified School District in how we can expand our kindergarten program to be full day. Obviously, we're also looking at our middle school conversions, the continued progress and development of our language immersion programs, and our remaining bond projects, and especially our enrollment projections. So as we look at our enrollment projections, that's going to drive a lot of discussions for school districts around the Bay Area, up and down the entire state, and specifically here in Fremont Unified. So the map that you see in front of you is a map that was put together by the CDE, the California Department of Education. And what you see in the shades, the darker the red, the greater the decrease in student enrollment. So you can see across the whole state, there's only one area that is blue, and that's the one county in the state that has had growth in their enrollment. Depending on the shade of the red, the deepest red is a negative 5% of enrollment. So you can see in the Bay Area, we're seeing decline in enrollment across the Bay Area. You can see virtually up and down the state, we're seeing a significant decline in enrollment. I believe this year will be the first year that the state of California has had an overall decline in enrollment in the 20 plus years that I can remember even looking at these numbers in my career. What that means for Fremont Unified School District at the local level is what was our enrollment based on our projection. For fiscal purposes, each year we project what our total enrollment will be. This year, of our projected enrollment, we were down about 4%. Districts across Alameda County were down anywhere between 3 to 6%. There were a few districts that held steady. Most districts were below their projections. So what does that mean for us numerically? It means that we're down 1,250, around 1,300 kids. And that enrollment changes week to week because we have some students enroll, we have some students leave. But you can see just by the numbers in front of you that we do have a pretty significant decline in enrollment this year. How much of that enrollment this year is specific to COVID-19 and the pandemic, we'll have to see. I want to call out for those who are watching this presentation that you'll see in the first column there are elementary schools, a significant decrease of over 2,300 students, but that's not really our net decrease. 1,400 students that are in our virtual academy. So while our largest decrease is at the elementary level, I just want to call out that because we didn't have a virtual academy at budget adoption, that's why it looks the way it does now. As we talk about enrollment moving forward year over year, because remembering when we look at our fiscal picture, we look at a multi-year budget projection. The state requires that we submit, as does our County Office of Education, requires that we submit a 3-year budget every time we submit a budget. So we're always looking at our enrollment projections year over year. You can see based on a recent demographer report from SchoolWorks, which was presented to our Board of Education in December, you can see we're continuing to project a decline. That's based on birth rates in the county, as well as trends that we see up and down the state and what we see locally here for our community within Fremont. We do expect that decline to go anywhere from 33,000 down to just about 31,000 in 2027-28. So we're hoping that that decline can level off, or that maybe we can flatten it out early and at some point find a moderate or appropriate level of increase. The reason that's important for us is because the way California school districts are funded, we are funded on our enrollment through our average daily attendance. So it's not just based on the total number of students we have, it's what percentage of those students are attending school regularly. And so those two things are things that we watch very carefully from a fiscal standpoint. It would be my preference as an educator that we did not connect our funding model to our students in the way the state connects them now. But that's the way we're funded, and we have to be mindful of our revenues and expenditures related to how we operate. As we look at our budget conditions in the moment and a little bit in the past, last February, Alameda County Office was providing us official and formal notice of our need to make significant budget reductions or revenue enhancements. We worked very hard right away last year to start addressing those budget issues early. And we also received a lot of support in COVID dollars, one-time state and federal dollars, which helped us from a fiscal standpoint. The Alameda County Office of Education reduced our recommended cuts from 17.6 down to 7, and they approved, our board approved a $7.7 million reduction, which met the criteria for Alameda County Office of Education. When we finished last year, our ending fund balance went from 23.7 million up to 44.8 million, which was a really solid jump in our ending fund balance, again, buoyed in large part by one-time funds and one-time dollars. As we closed the books on last year, our ending fund balance again increased. It went up $32.4 million. And in large part, these were things that were based on not operating our schools last year in person. That creates cost savings in a number of areas, and that's not why we kept them closed. But that is a practical reality. The things, for example, just in terms of consumables, supplies, electricity, those are just some of the things that have an impact on a budget the size of Fremont Unified School District's. For context, our annual expenditures generally run above $400 million for Fremont Unified School District's budget. Again, the one-time funding was a critical support, and we received ESSER dollars, Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief, and we also received ELOG dollars, Expanded Learning Opportunity Grants. All of the ELOG dollars require a plan to be approved by the board, submitted to the CDE, as I mentioned earlier. And a lot of our dollars went to staffing and funding our virtual elementary program. As I mentioned earlier, we provided those options for students. When we started this school year, we had roughly 50 to 52 teachers staffed in our elementary virtual program. And that staffing came in addition to the staffing that we had for in-person instruction. The reason we did that was to try and create a situation where, as much as possible, we could take our students who were in the virtual academy, and when they were ready to return to the classroom, put them back in the schools where they originated. Now, we could not make a promise that that would happen in every case. And I know for many of our community members, that was a little bit of a point of frustration. However, we did the very best we could to maximize the possibilities of returning to the home school, but we couldn't make a unilateral guarantee in every case. But we invested a significant amount of funding in the virtual program this year, and we've been very pleased to offer that for our students. So our next steps from a fiscal picture are developing our next year's budget. And what informs that budget? Well, in January, we'll see the governor's budget proposal. Eventually in May, we'll see the governor's May revision. And then in June, we'll see the state adopt their budget. Before I move to the next point, I just want to highlight that we are very optimistic that we'll see some good news from the governor's budget in January. State revenues continue to exceed expectations, and we anticipate that statewide there will be far more money available to the state than they expected to have. There's a lot of complexities when it comes to funding public education, but there are some indicators that we may see some increases above. Now, we project, as I mentioned earlier, a 3-year budget cycle. And the last point of projection that we use is the adopted budget in June by the state. When the governor's budget comes out in January, there will be a review of that budget by our staff. We'll be going up to Sacramento to attend a conference for a debrief on that budget proposal. You'll also have statewide agencies such as School Services of California, Capital Advisors, and a number of other groups such as the Legislative Analyst's Office and the Department of Finance release publications related to the governor's budget proposal. Once we start to see those publications, review that literature, we'll consider what it may mean for Fremont Unified School District and how well we think those proposals from the governor will hold up through the legislative process. And then we'll see what it looks like in May. But we are cautiously optimistic that the fiscal picture the next 2 years is going to look better than we projected and better than the state projected at the end of last year. Currently, we're in negotiations with all of our bargaining units, and we recognize the important need to recruit and retain the best employees for our students and for our community. Looking from a fiscal standpoint at addressing the high need facilities areas that we talked about earlier, and we continue to focus on student learning. There's a term out there in the world that I don't really love called learning loss. I prefer to refer to it as unfinished learning. And we're certainly keeping our eye on that for students. We're using local assessments right now to measure student learning, to see where we may need to provide targeted intervention for students. And of course, we have state level assessments that will continue to come in the spring. Additionally, we continue to focus on ways to improve our equity, diversity, and our inclusion outcomes by the school district. Some current developments that I think are worth noting, some celebrations and some just things that are noteworthy and things that our community and our staff, I'm sure, are seeing. We, like all other districts in the Bay Area, are impacted by a statewide teacher and staffing shortage. You've seen us continue to reach out and advertise. We have many vacancies across the district. Most of our classroom positions are full, but we continue to have vacancies across the district where we would love it if maybe there are members of our community who might be interested in applying, can look on our website for those openings. Additionally, we continue to have difficulty finding enough substitute teachers each day. There are certain licensing requirements that are required for substitute teaching, but if you're someone who might be interested in that, you can log on to our website and look for some of those job postings as well. That is something that's impacting us. It creates some additional workload that is significant and noteworthy for our teachers and our support staff and our educators in general. And when we're missing substitutes, that also has an impact on our students' education. And we recognize that. Our HR department has been working around the clock to try and address those. And we, like many other districts, are working very hard to address that need. As I mentioned earlier, there's some unfinished learning that's happened because of distance learning and the pandemic. And the pandemic did not affect everybody equally. So people have different circumstances in which they've navigated this journey. And we take all those circumstances and we welcome them with open arms and an open heart. And we're adjusting to those different levels of learning. And that may be academic and it may be social emotional as well. We have a number of students that might be in, for example, 7th grade, and their last time in person wasn't 6th grade, it was 5th grade. And so that's a pretty significant jump. And we're supporting and scaffolding at the school site levels to how to help those students. I appreciate all the work that our classroom teachers, our school support staff are doing, and our administrators to support that as well. A part of that support has been our increased social emotional learning. As we mentioned earlier, some additional counselors and some additional intervention opportunities that we funded with our one-time dollars. Additionally, like most school districts, Fremont Unified, under the pandemic, has really become a micro public health agency. While we don't necessarily our own COVID-19 guidelines and recommendations, we rely on the state and Alameda County for those guideposts. But we are conducting a significant amount of PCR testing every single day, every single week across Fremont Unified. We have had to hire a number of staff to support with contact tracing to make sure that we're notifying our families to the best of our ability as quickly as we can. We've had to hire additional staff to track vaccine levels and vaccine compliance, because not only is there a state order for it now where staff has to be either vaccinated or tested weekly, we do know that the governor has announced a future mandate. Briefly, I'll talk about the future mandate. We don't have the legislative background for that future mandate yet. All we have to go on at the moment is the governor's press release in October outlining that vaccines would be mandated, that those mandates would not go into effect until the vaccines were fully authorized by the FDA for an age span. The age spans, for example, are 7th grade through 12th grade. And so once that entire section of students, 7th grade through 12th grade, has the vaccine fully authorized by the FDA, then the next semester after that, it would go into effect. We know we're still under emergency use authorization for our kids that are 15 and younger. So when all of that will come into effect, we're not certain yet. And we still have to see what happens on the legislative side when all of that comes to fruition. We definitely have our eyes on that target. We'll continue to keep our community updated and our staff updated as we learn more. As a way to provide access to the vaccine, again, I want to thank our community partners. We've had great partnerships since last year with Haller's Pharmacy. This year, we've expanded that to Safeway, We've continued to have great support from Bay Area Community Health, from Washington Hospital, and through all those things, number of vaccine clinics for our students who are now eligible at the younger age for the vaccine. We've also been able to offer booster appointments, and that has been, I think, a helpful point for our community as well. Outside of COVID-19, we've been able to increase our AP test offerings this year for the first time in many years. I want to thank our school site staff for that work, our administrators, our district level directors on the instructional services side of the house who've been able to help expand those offerings. We're hosting the SATs in Fremont Unified School District for the first time in a very long time. We're excited to be able to do that for our students in our community as well. And through the hard work and sacrifice across the entire district, we have been able to improve our fiscal picture and our reserve over the next 3 years. That has happened in part because of an influx of one-time dollars, but it's also happened because we've made structural adjustments to our budget. It's also happened because we've had to reduce staffing in different places, and we've had to reduce services as well. And so when we reduce staffing and services, there's a negative impact to our programs and to the district as a whole. And as a result of those things, we have been able to improve our fiscal picture, and that is a good thing for us as a community and as a school district. As I said earlier, we're in negotiations with all of our labor groups, and we've been able to continue with some textbook adoptions that have been put off for years and years so that we can bring newer, more appropriate, more updated, more equitable materials to our students and our staff. And last but not least, since we're back in person, site visits. I know they're not completely open to our community, but they have been open to our staff. And for me, starting my second year in Fremont Unified, my first year of in-person instruction, these site visits have been invaluable to me. I've been able to see firsthand, as you can see in the picture on the left here. This was a classroom at Grimmer, one of my earlier visits this year. And this was just one of the examples where I can see firsthand the culture and the climate of a school, what our students are experiencing, the great work of our staff. And actually, my apologies, that was at Blakehow. That was not at Grimmer. I remember that classroom now. But those site visits have been invaluable for me as a new superintendent of Fremont, and it's given me an opportunity to see more and more of our community, more and more of our students. And we are looking at adjusting guidelines in the spring. Now, obviously, with a new variant, and we saw today up to a 47% increase in cases across the state, we're going to be very cautious with how we make those adjustments. But I do want our community to know that at some point soon, we would like to get to a place with appropriate structures and scaffolding in place where we can increase that access to being back on our campus. Again, I want to highlight that that's going to happen in very slow stages, in very scaffolded and structured ways, so that we can continue to work hard throughout our community to mitigate the impact of COVID-19 in our schools. And as we approach the end of our presentation, I want to thank our community and our students, as well as our staff. I have not been in this business as long as some people, but I've been in it for over 20 years. Things during that time, I think like everybody else on this call, this is the first pandemic that we've worked through in education in our lifetimes, and remarkably challenging for everybody. And I appreciate how everybody adapted to that. I think there's pretty much universal agreement that returning to campus this year has been an equally challenging experience. And our students have stepped up to that challenge. Our staff has stepped up to that challenge. And it's been an intense process this year. But when you're out at the school sites and you see the learning that's happening, you see the great care and guidance that's happening by our staff across the district, and you can see the extracurricular programs that are coming back into place, you can see that we're moving in the right direction. Not that it's perfect, but that we're moving in the right direction. And so I want to thank everybody for their involvement in that, whether it was attending a Friday night football game at Tech Stadium, to recently attending the incredible performance by the Irvington High School drama production of A Wrinkle in Time. There are so many great things happening across the district, definitely moving in the right direction. And that happens only through the partnership of our students, our staff, our community, and through the guidance of our governance team and our Board of Education. Lastly, if there's something that you're interested in, we may have a committee opportunity for you. There are many committees that are recruiting for representatives. You can click on the link that's in the presentation, which will be posted to the website at a later time. And that will provide an opportunity for you to apply for those. Also, as I mentioned earlier, we would love it if there's a time and a place where you could consider coming to be a part of Fremont Unified School District. And again, I would encourage you to take a look at what we have for you and what we have for our community. If you're following along on some of our social media channels, you'll see some of the great things that are happening. We have a district Facebook page. I personally, as a superintendent, am most frequently posting my school visits and notes about the district to my Twitter account, which is at CJ Kamek, just like my name. And if you're interested in following along there, you may be seeing some things of interest to you. And I want to also thank everybody who took the time to submit questions in advance of this evening. As we've gone through the presentation, I'm going back to make a couple more, to just check a couple more notes to make sure we've addressed the questions that came in. I think we have covered them all. Of note, some of the committees that you're able to also look at online would be our Measure E, Citizens Bond Oversight Committee, our Facilities Advisory Committee. Just some of the committees that you can see. Most of our committee meetings are streamed either live or they're posted immediately after as a recording. So if you're interested in other things that are happening within the district, you can find those on our website as well. I would like to thank our staff for being here this evening. I'd like to thank our audience who was with us today. And if you have questions that you'd like to see addressed, we'll be holding 2 more town halls. One tomorrow in the mid-morning and one Wednesday afternoon, evening. You can look on our district website for that information. And we'd love to see you join one of those as well. And if you'd like to submit a question in advance of those, I'd be happy to see how we can incorporate that presentation. And with that, I'll call our session this evening to a close with gratitude. And I want to wish everybody who's watching a wonderful holiday season. I hope this time is filled with things that make your heart happy and bring you joy. Take good care, everybody.